Good morning, everyone. This morning is Saturday, October 20th, 2018, and we welcome you to our Saturday morning Bible study class. Today we are reporting from the North Star Cottage, Jeremy's home, and it is in New Jersey, the United States of America, and we welcome you all. And today, Jeremy is our moderator.
Good morning. So today's quote is from Miscellaneous Writings by Mary Baker Eddy. If the Bible and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures had in our schools the time or attention that human hypotheses consume, they would advance the world. True, it requires more study to understand and demonstrate what they teach than to learn the doctrine of theology, philosophy, or physics, because they contain and offer with fixed principle, given rule, and unmistakable proof. The scriptures give the keynote of Christian Science from Genesis to Revelation. And this is the prolonged tone. For the Lord, He is God, and there is none beside Him. And because He is all in all, He is in nothing unlike Himself, and nothing that worketh or maketh a lie is in Him, or can be divine consciousness. End quote.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Mary, because when she was reading that or her recordings of Miscellaneous Writings, afterwards she told me that would be a good initial quote for the Bible study, and that was last spring, so thank you.
Well, it's something really to pray about. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if the Bible and Science and Health were in our schools? So we can certainly
pray
homes.
for it.
Pray for it, yes. Why not?
And certainly school without the Bible and Science and Health isn't doing the kids any favors. If you look at the pattern of it, it's clear to see that things have gone downhill since taking it out.
Right, it hasn't made the world a better place.
So we certainly can pray for it. In the meantime, we certainly have it in our homes. Keep it in our homes and magnify it in our homes.
And in our Sunday school.
And in our Sunday school. And as Jesus, he preached wherever he went, so we can too. Not in a
preachy way.
Not in a preachy way, but yes, but in a loving way and in a kind way, because everyone wants this truth. It's in them. As a child of God, it's there. Just a matter of seeing it and bringing it out in others, this truth. Anybody else with this? Or thank you, Jeremy.
Yes. When I was, it made me think of when I was a child going to school, and I was, out of 25 kids, I was about one of 5 that didn't go to a religion class. They'd been going to Sunday school, which didn't tell me much. But anyways, what fascinates me is that most of the kids were of one religion, not Christian Science. And they were the bullies, and I was a foreigner, so they were very bullying to me. And what's the contrast is that I had some friends that were some of the kindest and nicest and most amazing people. And when I became a aspiring Christian Scientist, I talked to them about it, and it turned out that they had either their parents or a grandparent or somebody in the family had been a Christian Scientist. And it just astounded me how that, even though they didn't believe in it, it had made their character so kind and loving.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for that, Mike.
I had something I wanted to share today. Now's probably the time. It's makes me think of the watches that we're doing and the importance of the watches. It's from a message to the church 1902, page 2. It says, to live and to let live, without clamor for distinction or recognition, to wait on divine love, to write truth first on the tablet of one's own heart. This is the sanity and perfection of living, and my human ideal. The science of man and the universe, in contradistinction to all error, is on the way, and truth makes haste to meet and to welcome it. It is purifying all peoples, religions, ethics, and learning, and making the children our teachers.
It's wonderful. Thank you so
Perfect.
much. Yes. Yeah. Perfect description of our Bible study today. Is Craig here by any chance? No. I mean, he tells the story of, as a child, there were an older couple, Christian Scientists, on his block, and it was their kindness that they expressed to him that stayed with him and eventually turned him to Christian Science. So, love and kindness being that example goes a long way. And even if you don't see the fruits of it right away, I mean, that couple certainly didn't see the fruits of it right away. They never saw the fruits of it, but it was working. It always does. And it's working throughout our land and throughout our world, the leaven of truth.
In my own experience, I think it's looking backward. My father had science and health all those years that we were growing up. We were not taught science and health. We did go to, or Christian Science, we did go to Sunday school. But often now I look back at how different he was. It makes me think, okay, that makes sense now. Because at the time I didn't know. He had science and health since 1946. And now I see in that book many sections where he's made notes. So it really does make a difference. We often thought something was different about him, but it makes sense now. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Today's topic is the form of a servant. And the first question is, who were the sons of Zebedee? What did their mother ask for them? And how did Christ Jesus respond?
Well, the sons were James and John. I believe those were the same two that were called the sons of thunder.
Yeah, they were two of the 12 apostles.
I think their mother was named Salome, and she was the sister of Jesus' mother.
Yeah, so they were cousins with Jesus. And I also read that Salome was one who waited and served Jesus. He needed people to help him, to feed him, to house him. And she was one. So they were probably all well acquainted with each other in that way.
She was also at the cross, watching, they said, from a distance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyone else on the sons of Zebedee? Okay, what did their mother ask for them?
He wants them to sit at the side of Christ Jesus, one on each side.
Yep.
Sometimes I wonder if because there was this human relationship that they felt like maybe they could ask for a special privilege,
Yeah.
because they were so familiar and known to them.
And her timing was interesting, too.
Yes.
I read that they put their mother up to asking for them instead of them themselves, because she served God, or served the Christ. and they thought that he would not tell her no because of her caring for him.
Isn't that emotional blackmail?
Certainly personal sense. And what were you saying, Betty, about the timing?
He was just finishing up talking about what was going to happen with the crucifixion and so forth, and in fairly plain terms. And this comes up right after he mentions that, and I thought the timing was kind of bad.
It's really unthinkable.
I read that they thought they didn't really understand him. Matthew Henry said this, that they thought his kingdom would come and it would be a material kingdom and that they could be part of it in the material world. That's what I read.
They really didn't understand until after he returned from death.
Well, isn't that what most people thought at the time? That they thought that their Savior was going to save them from the Romans and give them an independent nation, and they'd live happily ever after on this earth.
One of the things that stood out to me, hit home with me, was a commentator said, it was actually Matthew Henry, that those are commonly most confident who are least acquainted with the cross. And I realized even coming here, I've had to learn great lessons, and I had a great enthusiasm, and it's hard work and it's serious, and I do know I had to think differently, and I had this overconfidence that it's humbling to see what you have to. And I know I haven't even seen all of it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what Jesus' response was all about, isn't it?
Well, Linda had read about, not having clamor for distinction, and that reminded me of, in past lessons we've read that Jesus made himself of no reputation, and that here they were trying to clamor for distinction. So
it was a direct opposite.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we certainly have learned here, you don't seek positions. Positions find you. God promotes you. But when you seek it, when you want to be reader or practitioner, and we've had people, and actually most of them are not here. When they come, they're interested in being in the practice. That's their main thing. They want to come here and be in the practice, or they want to come and be first reader or something, and that's their first request. That to me is like a big red flag. And if you knew what it really took to do those things, we used to get told, you some ways you're not literally, but nailed to the cross. Very often when you take on those positions, all kinds of things happen. Many of you know, including, trouble in your family sometimes, because you're growing and progressing, and maybe someone in your family doesn't like that. And you've got to be willing to bear that cross. Now, it's a great privilege and a great honor to do it. It's nothing to fear, because it's already been there. It's just coming out to the surface to be healed. And that's a great thing. And it will put you miles ahead of where you would have been if you hadn't sought to come out, as I say, come out from the shadows and be part of things and take up the cross.
I think ultimately you really never lose anything worth having.
You certainly don't.
No, that's right. And you gain so much more than you could imagine when you do persevere and when you are faithful to the call, when you get called.
It seems to be a universal thing that when somebody gains a position in truth and humbly has earned it, that there is disapproval from the world in one form or another. However, that only serves to strengthen you in your position for good and with God. And now there's a statement in Science and Health, and this isn't an exact quote, but she talks about the sepulcher in which is laid the fondest earthly hopes. So whatever it is that you cherish in this earth, you bury it in that sepulcher, it opens the door for great good that comes. But it's not something that's planned out humanly or manipulated humanly. It's God's doing.
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention that, just sort of an aspect of someone who wants to come in and be a first reader or second reader, it could be, for, just genuine reasons to do something for the church. And what I mean by that is, the branch churches aren't really independent, and they're not free to do things that they want to do. They may have to go back to the Boston church to get permission to do something, or if they do something that's generally not done, they might get noticed by the Boston church unfavorably, So the choices of what they can do for a church are rather limited. And that's hugely important for understanding the Plainfield Church. So we are independent. And we can come up with things that we think are worthwhile for our members that no other branch church does, because we're independent. And so that means there's a wide variety of ways to volunteer for the church. And then you can volunteer in a way that seems appropriate to things that you like to do and feel you're good at, or...
Absolutely.
No, thank you. And we welcome that. People are stepping up, offering to do things that they're good at, that they enjoy doing. They see an opportunity to help others within what the church has to offer. And that's demonstration. That's exactly how it should work. And I'll say something else. The branch churches, the other, the organization's branch churches, you said they're not independent. That's because they don't have the right sense of independence. They don't recognize their independence. They allow themselves not to be independent. But that's a choice. We didn't choose to be independent. God did. We were kicked out. And we fought a legal battle. And by winning that legal battle, we paved the way for any church to be independent if they want to be. There is no impediment to any Christian Science branch church becoming independent anymore. It's up to them.
We should get that out. It seems to be a way to... I think if the churches would become independent and exercise their independence, they would begin to flourish instead of dwindle. Who was speaking?
Well, that independence is found in Mary Baker Eddy's manual with the estoppels. If people did look into that and obey her manual, they would find their independence.
Thank you. That's absolutely true. It's all there. It's all here. And I think the time is coming for all of this to open up. And what Tom said about volunteering no way contradicts what I was talking about, where people are promoted by God to various positions. It's step by step. It becomes obvious when people are ready for certain positions. But the volunteering is something different. Volunteering is seeing a need and meeting it. And that's wonderful.
Thank you. As opposed to coming in and wanting to be in charge of the organization.
Right.
You see, this is what the sons of Zebedee did. They didn't seek to help in any way. They didn't seek, well, what can I do to help in the kingdom of God? They said, I want to be the top guy and sit next to Jesus, and that's what I want. I want to be honored. And
nor did they understand what it takes to be honored the way they thought they should be honored.
And that's why Jesus spoke to that.
And also about working for the church. There are many people that do, and many people do many things. And most of it isn't in the big, have any visual exposure. It's just done with the love of their heart and with God. And it is much needed and much appreciated, even though it doesn't come out to the big visual exposure.
It's what keeps our church running and going.
There are a lot of ways to show that you can be consistent too within the church, like giving testimonies every week and doing forum posts.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
And that's what elevates you to some degree here. When you are consistent in what you do, humbly, just keep at it. You're not thrown off. You rise to the challenges as they come, and they will come.
Isn't that a little bit a sense of arrogance when people do that? Oh, here I come, and I wanted to do this and that because I feel I can do better than what they're doing. I mean, it smacks a little bit of arrogance to me. I don't know.
Thank you, Pilar. Absolutely.
I think it smacks a lot of arrogance.
It does, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And we mostly don't have it, but occasionally we do. And as I said, those people, in thinking about it, they're all gone. They left because their motives weren't right.
They didn't know what they were asking.
They didn't know what they were asking.
And they left voluntarily.
Yeah, they were not kicked out or excommunicated. They left voluntarily. And even in some instances, and maybe we would let them do what they so-called wanted to do. What they did was they would fall flat on their faces because there was so much pride in what they did and so much bossiness in what they did and so much I'm a know-it-all. And they were not prepared humbly to receive their directions from God, which is a requirement in this church.
Sometimes when you volunteer for something or you're asked to do something, you find out you had a hidden talent you didn't know you had.
Very true. No, and so many of you have come in and seen the need and met it. I've certainly talked about Linda and Shardy because they came quietly in and they saw our Sunday school room was a mess. And they very quietly volunteered to clean it up and organize it because the rest of us here had not had the time. And it was needed, but it was a humble thing to do. And I'm everlastingly grateful. And now we have a new library committee, finding books, which is another wonderful need. They saw a need, they met it. That's Tom and Linda and Candy. And so I'm very, very grateful for those who have done that quietly and humbly. And not in any way, I know everything and I'm going to tell everybody what to do. Because thank you, Pilar. That is arrogant, it's obnoxious, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, as I think the sons of Zebedee did. They were very sticking out like sore thumbs. And not only that, then how did the other disciples feel?
They didn't like it.
No, they didn't like it. Everybody started getting hot around the collar. Yeah, because you sense that. And I said, well, why not me? Why don't I do it?
I'm working hard.
I'm working hard. When God appoints, however, well, sometimes there is some jealousy, but the person has earned it and they can't be thrown off.
I think it comes back to what Gary was talking about. It's the true spirit. If it's in the branch church, then they are independent, and if it isn't, then they're ruled by the mother church. What I saw in my little society didn't even have the status of a church, was that the people were incredibly loving and really wanted to do right, but they just didn't know how. And in the end, it became that there was all this jealousy over fighting over this empty offer to buy the church building. And then when all was said and done, the reason the Mother Church wanted control was because they got like 98% of the proceeds when the church was sold.
Wow.
So it's not in the human organization, is it?
It is not in the human organization.
It is in the spirit of truth and love.
And if those of you who got the Heartsick letter will see that there's a new book coming out called The Two Towers. And it goes into explaining where some of this money, if not a lot of it, is going, because we can't help but scratch our heads and say, where the heck is all this money going? It does not seem to be being used for right and good and holy purposes. So
I have a question. Is one of the brothers was John? Is that the John that was the beloved disciple?
we have discussed this before. Tom, do you want to? No, I'm not. I'm just saying I'm not sure we came to a conclusion. Tom, do you want to speak to this?
All right, say that again. What are we?
John, who was the beloved disciple who wrote the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
I think that's what we understand. You know.
I heard both. I heard that yes, it was, and then I also heard that it couldn't have possibly been, because the John who wrote Revelation would never have acted in such a manner. And there were more than one Johns. He wouldn't have been the John. He wouldn't have been the, what do they call them, the Boys of Thunder or something. So you know, that my feeling is I honestly, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, there were a lot of Johns.
There were a lot of.
At least there were two.
Yeah, maybe he matured into it. Could be.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Well, I would expect them to. I mean, you would expect them to mature into it, wouldn't you?
Yes.
I mean, none of the disciples really, or the apostles, got it until after the resurrection anyway, right? Mrs. Eddy even makes that clear. That they all had this limited sense of Jesus' mission and of who and what he was until after the resurrection, when he came back and they saw that the truth that he had lived and had benefited others also benefited him. And then they began to see it. And that's when they started doing their own healing work and went out on their own mission.
And you know, I've been thinking about this. I think it's also true with Mrs. Eddy, because many people, I know fairly for one, will say, how could they have done all this and, you know, betrayed her in such a way and changed the manual? And they didn't get it either. Here they were so close to her and saw all kinds of healings. The human mind didn't get it. So I guess we must never be discouraged. They didn't get it. They were right with her. The leaven of truth is working. Perhaps our understanding of science today is much greater than it was back then. I'm not speaking of Mrs. Eddy, but others, even those around her, some, especially the human business mind that was around her, that thought they knew everything. Again, they thought they were right. They knew it. She was just a dumb little lady. I mean, it's horrible to say, but certainly how they acted.
As far as James and John, to me, it's encouraging, because I know I've done and said things that I'm embarrassed about, so it's good to know I can move on and learn and get to a better place. So.
Maybe if I can add on who wrote Revelation, okay? So just something to think about is, I mean, of all the disciples, there's only one John, you know. And a John wrote Revelation, and, you know, for centuries people have noodled on who wrote what book in the Bible. And so it does lead you off on a path that anybody who thought wrote a book in the Bible was not them, it was someone else, you know. I mean, commonly they refer to Isaiah as in, several books, 2 or 3 books. And Isaiah didn't write it, So I don't know what to say except that I sometimes just take it very straightforward. Isaiah wrote Isaiah. John wrote the apostle wrote Revelation. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's good.
So
Yes.
then John, the son of Zebedee, was also the one who wrote Revelation. So,
And there was quite a bit of time that expired between this event, which is recorded in Matthew, and then much later when the Gospel of John was written and the epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John were written. And even after that, much later, was the revelation received and transcribed by him.
That was when he was a prisoner in Patmos.
Right.
So I think any of us can say we're not the same person we were even a year ago or something like that. So,
and thank God we are.
Should be.
And somebody wrote very compassionately of the mother and thought that perhaps it was quite sobering to her when she was at the cross and saw who was at his right hand and left at that point. Not that they were going with him, but what it meant. And also James, her son, was the first to be martyred, I believe.
Yeah.
well,
So I'm sure she was very sobered by
she
what
saw.
she saw.
Yeah, and Jeremy wrote to that on the forum about, who was to the right and left of him when he was crucified.
That's where I read it. I know I read it somewhere. I loved it. I thought it was fabulous. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it kind of felt like the lesson writer was pointing me right at that. So just that idea. You gotta be careful what you ask for. I'm sure when James was martyred, the mom must have wondered,
Well, and
What did I
that was Jesus' response.
Hmm.
You don't know what you're asking here.
Yeah.
You will indeed
Drink my
drink
cup.
of my cup and bear the cross. You can count on it. But to sit at my right hand or my left hand is not mine to give. God appoints that.
So it was quite a lesson.
Yeah.
And I don't, Fairley wrote this lesson. I don't know whether that was intended. I didn't think it was, but it was a wonderful correlation about the left and the right.
Well, God knew.
God knew. God put it in there.
And fairly let God work. Thank you, Fairly.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Question 2. Many times a question was asked or a situation arose that gave Christ Jesus an opportunity to teach. Yet here he had already addressed the as yet unspoken question with a parable. Why didn't they hear him and understand?
Hey, who wants to explain the parable?
Well, this is the parable about the man who hired laborers in his vineyard, and he spent all day finding laborers who needed work. And some went out at the beginning of the day, some went out in the middle of the day, and some went out near the end of the day. And when they were all done, he gave them each a penny. And the guys who started at the beginning of the day were jealous of the guys who started out at the end of the day. And they thought they should have gotten paid more than the guys who went out at the end of the day. And the guy said, "What's wrong with you? Didn't you agree to work for a penny? And I gave it to you? And isn't that mine to decide and not yours? And why are you jealous? Or why are you coming back at me just because I am good?"
They were looking for overtime.
Good one.
Right, and they were thinking evil of the good owner of the vineyard who was bestowing good on everybody equally.
It just goes to say that there's no sense of entitlement just because someone has been studying Christian Science for many years, as opposed to a fresh thought that comes in, gets a really wonderful, inspired idea from God and acts on it. We should be rejoice in the good, no matter who it comes through in what form or whatever.
Thank you.
And also, is good finite? That you can only have a certain limited amount of good?
It's like Carol's testimony from Wednesday, knowing that she was glad for their good through all the people that she met.
Yeah.
This is something I've heard through the years in the practice, this jealousy. And again, I'll have people call me and the first thing they'll tell me, I'm class taught and I'm a third or fourth generation, Christian Scientist, as if that has bestowed some great thing on them, which is what they think, and which is probably what I would have thought years ago too, until I learned better. I've heard, well, look at them, or even, they're not even Christian Scientists and they're having such a good life.
Well, that's the same attitude as, the blood relation. I have blood relation through the generations, so then the sons of Zebedee they should get special favor because they have blood relations with Jesus. I mean, it's the same.
That's right.
Because their mother's sister.
That's right. Or I was taught by Dr. Tut. We've heard that too. That somehow you get special behavior. Or I think I honestly thought just because I was a Christian Scientist, nothing ever bad should happen to me because I was a Christian Scientist. These are all gross misconceptions.
And if something bad happens, then you feel really, really guilty that somehow you did something,
Right. Guilty and confused, right?
Mm-hmm.
And condemned. Guilty, confused, condemned.
And that plagues so many people who are still part of the Christian Science, so-called Christian Science organization in Boston.
Quite frankly, it's my feeling that if you study Christian Science and practice, you got more to contend with that could be seen and judged from those who don't know what's going on as maybe even embarrassing or why do you have to go through this? Jesus said, you shall indeed drink of my cup. We go through experiences where we have to bury the fondest earthly hopes. So, but you can take this in the right way and, this is an opportunity to progress and go forward from that point.
Thank you. There's a watching point to that effect, and I know Mrs. Evans would often speak to it because she went through many trials and difficulties, and she did not have people judge her. You walk a mile in her shoes, and then maybe you judge her, but especially people in the beginning. I mean, look at all that Mrs. Eddy had to contend with. Does that mean she was a bad Christian Scientist or didn't know stuff? She sure did. So you can't make judgments, and you can't be jealous, or you can't think because you've been here longer than someone else you're entitled to more blessings. That's faulty thinking. That's human thinking. That's not divine. It's not being grateful for another's good. It's wrong, and it will lead you up a very, very wrong path. One of jealousy and competitiveness and every ungodlike thing.
And I think the reason, going back to this parable, the reason they didn't hear him and understand was the materialism. The parable is referring to spiritual understanding and the dominion that gives us over all material beliefs and the good that is. which is infinite. It's not about money or material possessions or material, relations or whatever. It's not about anything human. And that's why they couldn't understand it. They weren't there yet.
I think sorry.
Go ahead.
They already had a plan too, and they weren't listening. And I find that true about myself. Am I really listening, or do I have something in my mind already?
Waiting for your turn to talk.
Right, I know. That's a
Well,
very
no,
good point.
that's a wonderful point because most people hear what they want to hear.
This talk it reminded me a little bit about the testimony Wednesday about being grateful that somebody found that parking spot.
Yeah, that's what Jeremy was alluding to.
Yeah, that was Carol's.
Carol.
That's a very important lesson we all have to learn. I remember learning it myself the hard way, but to be grateful for another's good. If you are not, how can you expect any good to come to you? And be so careful of judging people, because you can say, oh, look at them. They have everything. Their life is so wonderful. Well, how do you know? And how do you know how they got there or what's gone on? You cannot judge.
I think the other thing that was very hard in the organization I found was the standard of having to live up to this. And I felt even bad for the practitioners. It's like you couldn't make a mistake or have a problem, and everybody would jump on you or shun you. And it's got to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think the shunning was, I witnessed one that it really was disheartening in the branch church I belonged to.
Yes, the shun. Very painful.
Yeah, totally shunned because he had a problem and it didn't end well.
And is that Christian?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
I mean, really, for that to go on in a church that calls itself Christian.
And that's what, Mrs. Eddy saw among the churches, this bickering and fighting. Even, when she was here, jealousy among practitioners and who had the greatest church or the biggest church. She said, when Christian Scientists learn to love each other, there'll be no need for churches. But to think that that could be going on right when she was actually present, and it was. And it is very often the downfall of a church, this jealousy. Spurgeon writes, at the sight of great grace, envious hearts grow sour. The murmurer said, not that the generous Lord had lowered them, but that he had advanced others who had wrought but 1 hour. Their complaint was, thou hast made them equal unto us. In this, he had used his own money as he pleased, even as God dispenses grace as he wills. He is never unjust to any, but in gifts of bounty, he will not be bound by our ideas of equity. Had they been of the right sort, they would have rejoiced that they had been able to give to him a fair day's work, since they had borne the burden and the heat of the day. If they were really right, they just would have been grateful to have been active in his vineyard. And because they weren't, it showed what they were all about. And that's probably why this whole thing happened. It brings out this carnal mind that needed to be healed and corrected and healed. What did Mrs. Eddy, I was trying to find that quote where she said, that she talked about all the suffering and hours spent, but even so, she was but a debtor to God. It's a beautiful quote. That's not quoted exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what she suffered. She still considered herself in debt to God. So it's a very small-minded person who is critical of others in this regard. And that by small-minded, it's a carnal mind.
I have a question. I was wondering in the parable, how does everybody read this statement? So the last shall be first and the first last?
Okay.
Anybody want to answer that?
Well, Jesus answered and said, whosoever exalteth himself shall be humbled, but whosoever humbleth himself shall be exalted.
I think it's referring to how you think of yourself separate from God. If you think that you are first before God, you're going to find out that that attitude is going to place you in last place. Whereas if you recognize that you are last, that God is first, God will endow you with the greatest good, and you will be seen to be first in his eyes.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also know if people feel that they are really good at something, there's a good possibility they won't work hard or at all to get any better. I know my son, he started playing the clarinet many years ago. Within a few months, he was good, and the teacher said he was good. And then he didn't try for years to get any better. Now, because the kids that weren't as good in the beginning tried so hard, they were better than him. So then he had to try. So
That's a good example, and you do see, many people. You'll wonder, oh, look at this person; he's just achieving all kinds of things, and yet they end up really doing nothing with their lives, while the one who just slowly and quietly plods along ends up works at it. Maybe you were taught as a child the story of the turtle and the hare. What happens?
The turtle wins.
The turtle wins.
That's right. Quietly doing its thing.
Jumping and leaping and running, and seems like certainly the sure winner, while the turtle just goes along quietly, day by day. And so, the turtle wins. And also in Science and Health, where Mrs. Eddy says not to become a sluggard in the race, even if you seem not to be making any progress. When the smoke of battle dies down, you will see what you've achieved. I have found it in my own life, certainly. I have come in last many times, but you just keep at it. You don't be discouraged or give up on yourself. You just keep working. Persistence wins the prize.
And the good thing about that is you're not so easily tempted to think that you're some hot shot.
Yeah, well, the hot shot fell asleep on the way, thinking, I don't have to worry.
That's right.
His wins, yeah.
He was so confident in his abilities that he allowed himself to get distracted. And he went jumping around and running around in a lot of wrong directions, while the turtle kept in the straight line.
And it's interesting that it was the sleep that overtook the rabbit.
That's right. Yes.
And I think with the one who's the last, it's a feeling that they can do nothing without God. You're helpless. You know you're no good. You and all these prophets, I said Gideon and Moses, they said, who am I? Who am I to do this? So they have this sense that they are no good. And as Gary said earlier, when you have that sense, then God can take over. Because with God, all things are possible. So you can do tremendous things. In weakness, I am strong. And Mrs. Eddy lived by that. She said another beautiful quote of hers, where as just the what was it?
Humanly, I'm the smallest, but
Right.
spiritually, I'm the strength and sinew of the world.
Yes. That's not an exact quote, but it always struck me so. When she let God use her, look what she accomplished over and over. So that is what anyone wants to be first, which is not a good not a good goal. But you know you're nothing and you let God use you, wonderful things will happen. And you won't care if you're first or not. You just care if you're obeying God. That's all that matters.
Matthew Henry said that God is the great householder, whose we are and whom we serve. If we know we are His and we reflect Him and we only live to serve Him, doesn't matter what anyone else does.
Exactly.
Sounds like a segue to the next question.
Yes.
And I think you wouldn't work, because of what you're going to get out of it. You work for the glory of God. And, it doesn't matter what time you started.
Yes, thank you. Doesn't matter what time you started if you've got that humble spirit. It also, those of you who've never seen the movie Chariots of Fire, that's a good example. One person, and this is about a race, running a race, but one person wanted to be best, training, working, wanted to be best. The other person ran for the glory of God. It's quite a story. It's a good one.
Question number?
One of Mrs. Eddy's most loyal and successful disciples was Janet Coleman, and when her first talk with Mrs. Eddy was that she said that she wasn't worthwhile, and Mrs. Eddy said, because of that, I am going to take you as a student. And the Carpenters, Gilbert Carpenter is a great example, because I don't know that he had any position, quote unquote, in the church, and yet he has left us with some of the best writings of Mrs. Eddy ever.
Thank you.
Right.
That's right.
Certainly learn the value of work. It's in everything he does. Okay, question number 3. Give definitions of minister and servant that are appropriate to the intended meaning in Matthew 20, 26, and 27.
Okay. Well, here's how I look at it, right? So if we take verse 27, all right, so if you want to be chief, basically saying, okay, if you want to be the head of everything, you start at the bottom. So you start at the lowest position if you want to be the head of something. In verse 26, it's talking about if you want to be great, and I take this looking at the definition of the word minister in Greek, but if you want to be great at something, well, then you just got to go out there and start doing something. So go do, take action, get things done.
Thank you.
Well, and I think it also implies a motive to care for others, to look out for others, to occasionally provide things that are needed for others that they maybe don't see clearly for themselves or can't for themselves. Somebody once defined, and this is getting back to going out and doing things. Somebody once defined capitalism as doing things for others and getting paid for it. But it starts with doing things for others.
So many successful businesses have started. It's meeting a need, and usually you don't start thinking about how much you're going to get paid. You just want to help others, and I mean, that certainly Mrs. Eddy did that, and with Christian Science, she had no thought of money or getting paid. She just wanted to help others. She ended up becoming very wealthy. And then again, what are you going to do with that wealth? And she only used it for the betterment of mankind. But it is always this idea of serving. We're here to serve. This is what I thought this was good, again, from Spurgeon. Said, in the great Gentile monarchies, princes ruled by authority, force, and pomp. But in his kingdom, the rule would be one of love, and the dignity would be one of service. He who could serve most would be the greatest. The lowliest would be the most honored. The most self-sacrificing would have most power. Whenever we see the nobles of earth contending for power and pomp and circumstance, we should hear our Master say, "But it shall not be so among you." We must forever quit hunting after honor, office, power, and influence. If we aim at greatness at all, it must be by being great in service, becoming the minister or servant of our brethren. And that's it. The kingdom of God is quite different than the kingdom of this world.
In Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps on page 404, Gilbert Carpenter says, "There are no insignificant tasks, no belittling positions in Mrs. Eddy's home. The ones who did the cooking or cared for the horses ennobled their offices by relying on God to fulfill them. In other words, the opportunity to broaden the application of one's understanding of Christian Science was even greater in connection with menial tasks than it was in connection with those functions which, in Christian Science, are commonly understood as requiring the support of mind in order to fulfill them."
Thank you.
It's
That's
beautiful.
Perfect.
That's beautiful.
Perfect.
And you know, sometimes you think, well, that kind of person will be stepped on. And even if they might be, you can think of Joseph. He's always a good example in the Bible. But eventually, the promotions come, because what kind of person do you want in your business or in your home? Or you want this kind of humble, loving, kind, serving spirit,
I
right?
think some of the best.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting that some of the best CEOs have started maybe cleaning the toilets in wherever they started working, packing things, and then gradually move up to that position. They, I think, are quite different from the others who maybe have come in, probably not even merited, but somehow got into the positions. So.
Thank you. Many people say if you want to start with the very lowest position. And I've heard, people graduating from college having this, unless I'm going to get a managerial job, I don't want to, I'm all this training. I'm not going to work. And so they don't work and they just sit, and then they complain that there are no job opportunities.
Meanwhile, in that same time, somebody got hired ground floor and then has just gone up to the position.
Absolutely. I've seen it. Our daughter, she started out, because here in this church, we clean the toilets, we cleaned other people's homes, we worked, we cooked, we worked at the lowliest jobs. And my daughter was part of the work parties, as was my son. And so they learned all these things. And my daughter, her first business was a cleaning business. She was only like 15 or 16, but because she was good and humble, did the job, she got paid, she made money, and then she just goes up on the scale. But you don't do anything because you think you're some highfalutin person. And actually, cleaning is a very good, honest job. A lot of people make great salaries cleaning.
Where would all these important people be if their bathrooms were disgusting and dirty too?
Exactly.
So lucky to have people take care of them.
Right. There is no, work is work, and there's no bad work or lowly work, unless you think of it that way.
No belittling position.
No.
And really, I think it's a beautiful thing to have the spiritual sense of everything you do. I learned this because cleaning is not just cleaning, it's making radiant room. It's making the light of God shine somewhere. I mean, from that point of view, it changed my attitude to cleaning.
Absolutely.
There's much more to all this.
No, and I think I think it was recorded somewhere that someone in Mrs. Eddy's household complained of doing of having material work. Mrs. Eddy's response was, "I didn't know there was such a thing as material work."
Good answer.
I see cleaning as one part of God's law of continual restoration and renewal. It's just a continual thing for things to be renewed, beautified, restored, uplifted.
And when you can see that as in whatever work you're doing, when you can see God's purpose in whatever work you're doing, you get really good at it. You give off an atmosphere that attracts other people. It gives people confidence that they can trust you to do even more important things, and you get promoted.
And it's not that you're seeking it. And always remember, whatever you do it for the glory of God. You do it for God. You're not serving person. If you serve person, you will get discouraged. You'll see a hard taskmaster and you blah. But if you know whatever you do, you're serving God. Therefore, even if it is a hard taskmaster or whatever, you do it to the very best of your ability. It's God you serve. Always God. You lift your head above the human picture and serve Him. And in doing that, you'll find great release. You'll get rid of this personal sense of things, and you'll be able to do things you thought you never could do with great peace, rather than frustration and bitterness or hatred or rah, 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 rah.
Because that love that you have for God and for man will break down any barriers. It will heal any resentment, hatred, jealousy around you, and God will promote you.
Yes, and it could very well heal this boss, and if it doesn't heal the boss, you'll be lifted out of that situation into something much better, as Sharon was. I've seen it. I know it works. These are laws and rules and principles of the universe. If you follow them, all good is yours. It's possible. I know it for a fact. I know it in my own life, and I know it in the lives of others. And I've seen the other thing too. People promoting themselves or jealous or carrying on, and they go nowhere. Or if they seem to go somewhere for a while, they're in for a big fall. Anyone else? Jeremy?
Okay. Question 4. What have you learned at this church about the importance of taking the form of a servant, and how has this changed you? I would like to say when I first came here, I was fairly certain I had nothing left useful to give. But for some reason that I couldn't understand at the time, God brought me here. So I figured, well, maybe they can get some use out of me. So I always think that's really interesting how he ended up giving a lot of these things back to me that I did before in such a better way. So always grateful for that. Not expected at all.
Jeremy is a wonderful example of being promoted, maybe considered At the time he came, the least, the last, his wife kicked him out of the house, was divorcing him. He lost his job. Couldn't have been any worse. Now look at him.
Even my laptop died.
There's nothing worse than that.
All I had was my car, which I'm grateful for to get down here. So.
Yeah.
And your guitars.
And one guitar. I had one guitar.
And Luann too. Luann's an example. Now she's got this shop she built herself, just single-handedly. It's prospering. And her, again, what was her motive? What was your motive, Luann? She's here, right?
Yes.
In the pottery shop.
To help other people come out of whatever they're going through and to raise them up.
Exactly.
That's right. Motive.
That was her pure motive. And that motive, love inspires, designates, and leads the way. It was her love. It's love that gets you up in the morning and gets you energized for the day. You have to love something. And when we love God and love each other, we are motivated. Our days are wonderful because we just feel bursting with energy. And she did, and she did what would seem impossible. And that problems, which she overcame. And now she's got a beautiful shop. I mean, we should have pictures of it somewhere.
Yeah.
And they make beautiful things, and she's helping many people, as is Jeremy. And his motive too, he always wanted to help people.
I have 30 people that come every week.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
That's quite a ministry.
It is. It is.
Yes.
They applied these rules. And if your heart is good and right, you might not be able to find God, but God will find you.
And the right opportunities come, really. They do come. For you to do the good that is in your heart.
All it requires of you is a loving heart that sees the opportunity, not the heart that says, no, can't do it. No, don't want to do that. No, can't do it. Don't know how, can't figure it out. Never did it before.
It is true. One of the first things I thought when I got here is I will say yes to anything they ask me to do. No matter what it is. Because if I was willing to die before, then I should be willing to do whatever they want me to do. So.
And he has. And that's true. And that's sort of how I felt. My life was such a mess that I'd just as soon die than live. So when I got resurrected, I thought, okay, God, you can do with me whatever you would, because I'm yours.
And with that attitude, they have done incredible things.
That's
One thing that I find myself teaching in the shop is patience, which is something that I really needed when I first came to the church, and just patience with the process. And I see a lot of people that are making great progress with that. They come in there and just like you said, no, I can't do it. I don't understand. You do it for me. All this stuff is starting to turn around, and people are actually doing their own work and they're progressing. And I put their projects on Facebook page, and they get a lot of comments, and they just keep moving forward. But patience with the process is the most important thing right now.
Thank you. That's just beautiful. And as I mentioned, all our experiences, those of us here in Plainfield, we were all servants. No credit for anything, no money for anything, nothing. It was just working because we love God and we wanted to. And this isn't complaining. It's a great ministry, and it prepared us for other things to come. Little did we know it at the time. I mean, I would sometimes ask and we would all ask, what the heck are we doing? But we just knew it was for a greater cause, this cause of science. And in Again in Spurgeon, assuredly he who is greatest and chief among us has set us the example of the utmost love service. No servants waited on him. He was master and Lord, but he washed his servants' feet. He came not to be served, but to serve. He received nothing from others. He was a life of giving, and the giving of a life. For this purpose he was the Son of Man. With this design he came. To this end he gave his life a ransom for many. No service is greater than to redeem sinners by his own death. No ministry is lowlier than to die in the stead of sinners. That's our master's sacrifice. And Mrs. Eddy left a very similar pattern. So, can we do anything less? And this is also why perhaps sometimes Christian Science isn't the most popular religion, because
it requires work.
It requires things of us.
And it's not easy to comprehend. It requires work. It requires faith. It requires reliance upon your spiritual sense. And it requires putting off what the material senses tell you is good for you.
And it is the pearl of great price. So despite all of this, it brings the greatest joy, the greatest peace, health, every good thing is yours. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And I'm very grateful to all of you that stuck with the church that long. That's the only reason it's here and the only reason I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you.